All right, folks, we're going to go through section 4 for you in review for exam 2. We're going to start with the first slide here. I have a working appreciation for page 1 here, slide 1. Slide 2, knowing what factors sort of contribute to what a pharmaceutical company is going after is a wise idea. Know that heading into the exam. I think page 2 is definitely one that you want to know. Slide 3, choosing a target, absolutely will be on the exam. Slide 4, I think what you want to get out of this one is that, right, we're able to sort of develop mimics, right, for aspartic acid, for example, down here. I think visiting the slide for a short time period would be worthwhile. Slide 5, not particularly important, I would say. Slide 6, sort of, sort of how we go about discovering targets and sort of what they're based on. For example, right, in the endogenous ligands, right, to marketed drugs seen here. I think those are worth having appreciation of. Slide 7, I would know that sort of most. I think what I would take most from this is that we do want to aim for sort of more selective targets, right, as we start to pursue, or more selective drugs for targets as we sort of pursue drug development. That's one of the main overarching goals. Sort of, and that sort of encompasses not only getting after targets that are sort of more specific, right, in the body, but ones that are sort of maybe specific, right, to more microorganisms, for example, would be sort of another type of selection. Slide 8, you do not need to know that. Slide 9, I would visit this briefly, but it's not going to be a focal point for sure. Polypharmacology, slide 10, it's likely going to be a multiple choice question. Identify a bioassay. Again, you're not going to have to know what exactly each of these bioassays entails, but the sort of general concept of fail fast, fail cheap is going to be important. This is a good sort of overarching slide. But what I would say is sort of, as we head into them, you're not going to have to know them in detail, but you'd be able to recognize them, I would say. It's a good sort of multiple choice type question. So, generally speaking, most of these are sort of, high throughput type screenings. I would have a working appreciation for this, but just know sort of high throughput screening is a way that we go about looking for sort of binding to a drug target, for example. So I'd say slide 12, slide 13, slide 14, slide 15, slide 16, slide 17, and slide 18 are likely going to be sort of a quicker type question, maybe a multiple choice type question. You do not need to know slide 19. Understanding how to find a lead compound is definitely going to be a question somewhere on the exam. Understanding the natural products in slide 20 would be one source. Slide 21 also covers that. For microorganisms in slide 22, that's important. Marine sources, typically those are natural products, but marine sources are also another good source of them. Slide 23 is important. Slide 24, right, it come from animals, right? That's another source. Venoms and toxins in slide 25 is going to be important. Medical folklore, yes, that's also important. Slide 26. Placebo effect, willing a drug to work, I think is worth noting heading into a multiple choice section. Synthesized intermediates absolutely will be on there, right? 27, definitely a great source of them. Me Too drugs are also another great source. Slide 28. Starting from the natural ligand of modulator, talked about that earlier in this section is also another important area, so I would know that. 30, combinatorial over parallel synthesis, not particularly important. I would spend some time looking at slide 31, slide 32, slide 33, and slide 34. Those collectively will be asked on the exam, sort of that general concept. of sort of epitope mapping, for example. Slide 35, not important. Slide 36, not important for your studying. Obviously 37 is not either. 38, structural activity relationships, having a working appreciation for these is important. What you could sort of add to the molecule or delete from the molecule to sort of test whether or not they're particularly important. We've covered a bit about sort of how to do an SAR type study, develop a set of compounds for those. So 38 is going to be important. Then you get into a lot of your functional groups. So I'm going to probably buzz through these pretty quick. 39 is important. 40 is going to be important for you, alcohols and phenols. 41 is going to be important. 42, also important. 43, right, again, these are more functional groups, important. 44, important. 45 is important. 46 gives you a nice survey of what sort of a SAR type study would look like for an AMID, and sort of appreciating what you're taking away or adding, right? Hydrogen bond donors, acceptors, van der Waals type forces is going to be important. So 46 is important. 47, less important, but still important. 48 is important. 49, another great example. I would spend some time on that. 50 is important. 51, not particularly important, but I think this is a pretty cool example. It might pop up either sort of on this exam or the next one. Alkyl halides, right, as alkylating agents are important. Aryl halides, maybe not as important, other than sort of playing a role sort of in the spin sort of shift, or sorry, an NIH shift will be important. Thiol groups, 53, thiol groups, ethers, other groups, absolutely, I would definitely know those. The importance of heterocycles in 54, definitely important. That continues on to 55. Yeah, once we get into sort of like 56 and I think 57, you don't necessarily need to know sort of about their tautomer states or anything, but having a working appreciation for sort of those amine containing molecules and sort of their importance or maybe prevalence in sort of the development of drugs is important. Isosteres are going to be important. 58, 59. The concept of Fermat-4 definitely important. You're not going to have to determine sort of that it's an 18-degree angle or anything like that. It'd be something pretty straightforward. Alkyl substituents, how you make them and how you remove them is not particularly important. If you're interested in looking at this, do it, but I would say it's not going to play a major role. 61 is important, van der Waals type interactions. Aromatic substitutions, 62 will definitely be important. I'm not going to ask a ton about electronic effects this time around. On 63, extension strategies, 64, definitely important. They continue on to 65. 65, I would definitely know those. Extension strategies also continue on to 66. So knowing those would be good. And sort of that sort of occurs with sort of the sort of steric blocker type situation where when you install one of those, right, it prevents ketone reduction of this sort of steroid here. And that's important. So 66, 67, I would definitely know. 68, that sort of also covers extension strategies and the effects that those have. I would know those. Ring variations, having an appreciation that as you vary substituents on the ring, right, you can sort of use that as sort of sort of a modification, right, to sort of help binding or sort of prevent binding. Also might be worth noting heading into the exam. Ring fusions is another great sort of example of sort of extension strategies. Bioisosteres, I would expect that to move more on sort of a multiple choice type question. 72 continues on, bioisosteres an example. I would know that. 73, transition state isosteres. Yeah, I mean, anything sort of, having to do with that. You guys know that I love that tetrahedral intermediate. So definitely keeping those in mind is going to be important. The process of simplification, once again, I actually might take you through. So start with glypine, for example, and then I'll have you do sort of a simplification type series for that, where you sort of take the starting molecule, you simplify it, then you simplify it again, and you continue to do that, all A through D, for example, in this one. Slide 75, simplification. Yeah, be careful using stereocenters, right? When you sort of propose molecules, I think that's going to be more important as you head into the next exam 3. But again, I would stay away from stereocenters if you can, because remember, one stereocenter might bind, or one stereoisomer might bind, and the other stereoisomer might not, right? So the one that goes towards you might bind, the one that goes behind the board might not bind. Rigidification structures, yeah, this is going to be super important. In fact, I would start this slide. Really important, right, to keep everything in sort of conformationally locked, so it can bind to the target. Example rigidification, I would say maybe start the slide as well. 77, 78. Conformational blockers might be used, but I would say that it's not going to come in the context of sort of this like free rotation type situation with two aromatics. It's like you're going to come with, if you want to prevent sort of, say, an ester or an amide being cleaved, you sort of put a substituent right next to the ester or the amide that's sort of bulky, that's not going to prevent, let's say, a nucleophile, water, for example, from coming in. Usually those things are mediated, right, by a serine type residue. So, it becomes more of a challenge, right, as that molecule approaches sort of an enzyme, right, to sort of facilitate that transformation. So if that's something that's not clear, feel free to send me an email or discuss it in sort of one of our follow-up reviews. Partition coefficient is likely not going to be on there. Once again, you're not going to do math. General tactics for modification, masking, adding, removing polar functional groups. Not as important on this one, but having appreciation, those are important. Would be good heading into the exam. 80, yeah, wouldn't worry about that one. 81, let's see. Variations of pKa, I'm not going to ask you to sort of tune that for any sort of pKa variation, so I wouldn't worry about 81. Bioisosteres, again, that's going to be something that I sort of provide for you. I wouldn't spend too much time on 82. 83, I wouldn't spend too much time on that either. Steric shields in 84 could be important. Modifying the electric effects of bioisosteres. No, I wouldn't worry too much about that. We're not going to focus too much on electronic effects. 85, yeah, they have a pretty good appreciation for that. 86, to prolong drug lifetime, where you might want to remove susceptible groups. Definitely a great concept heading in. The sort of group shifts, that's almost like varying functional group positions on an aromatic. Good. Removal of susceptible metabolic groups. Oh yes, so this one continues. So I'd say 87 also is a good sort of example on the bottom. 88. We're not going to talk too much about group shifts on this one, truthfully. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. 88. Ring variation may come up. 89. Introducing metabolic susceptible groups, assisting in shortening a drug lifetime would be sort of another strategy, right? You can either lengthen the drug lifetime or you can shorten the drug lifetime through sort of, your choice of groups. And, I would come up with pretty good rationales for why that is. For example, if you install this methyl group, it's an activated position, right? So it's more likely than sort of the parent compound to go through oxidation, right? So reducing toxicity, right? These play a role. Again, when you see sort of chlorines like this, on the left molecule, moving to fluorines, things I want you to think about is like, okay, that prevents, so for example, an NaH shift from occurring. 92, not particularly important. 93, I would star prodrugs, really important, and it's typically an ester, right? Trying to sweeten the molecule so that you can take it orally, for example, and then it gets metabolized and then into its active form as it goes through the body. 94, important. 95, important is N-methylated prodrugs. It's a really great type of example of something that I might use on the exam. These SNAR type reactions, not particularly important, but you saw that sort of in the previous section too, section 3. It could come up sort of maybe on the next exam. Increasing or decreasing water solubility by attachment to a prodrug or to attachment to a group that makes it a prodrug, sort of important to note. So I would take note of 97. And on that, I know that was quick, but that's sort of my sort of quick take on these ones, and we'll have some more review for you shortly.